sejam todos muito bem-vindos, bem-vindas, bem-vindes. Nós começamos hoje mais um colóquio, nosso 30º colóquio do Proformação. Espero que vocês aproveitem esse diálogo, essa roda de conversa de hoje. Temos 2 convidados muito especiais, de lugares muito distintos e distantes aqui do nosso habitat comum. Espero que vocês também interajam conosco, mandem suas perguntas, seus comentários. Para quem está chegando aqui pela primeira vez, Colóquio do Proformação é um projeto. Proformação é um projeto criado por mim, sou criadora e organizadora desse canal. E em parceria com o GECAL, o Grupo de Pesquisa de Linguística Aplicada Crítica de Brasília, nós realizamos esse colóquio. E o objetivo do colóquio é promover um espaço de discussão, de debate, de ideias, né? A gente precisa de espaço de ideias para além das fronteiras da universidade. E aqui, então, convido você a participar dessa roda de conversa. Para começarmos o trabalho de hoje, convido a entrar aqui no nosso estúdio meu colega Kleber Aparecido. Seja muito bem-vindo, Kleber. Olá, bom dia, seja muito bem-vindo.
Olá, Kátia. Olá a todos que estão nos acompanhando via canal do Proformação. Eu queria saudar de uma forma muito carinhosa toda a comunidade acadêmica que está aqui presente online, a fim de nós fazermos, né, Kátia, a 30ª edição de nossos colóquios, né? É uma iniciativa de muito trabalho, de muito engajamento. Então, eu queria agradecer, viu, Kátia, em nome do nosso grupo de pesquisa, o GECAL, Grupo de Estudos Críticos e Avançados em Linguagem, pela parceria feita com a professora Kátia Martins, da Universidade de York, no Canadá, e também com o Proformação. E agradecer também tanto a Bruna, quanto o Lauro, quanto a Simone, que tem feito um trabalho bem interessante em nos ajudar na materialização dessa iniciativa. E hoje eu estou muito feliz, viu, Kátia, porque nós vamos ter uma oportunidade singular, eu de rever 2 queridos amigos, Hoffman Tian, da Universidade de Rutgers, nos Estados Unidos, em New Jersey, e o Rafi Saleh, que está em Bangladesh. Então, certamente, ter o Tian e ter o Rafi hoje, nessa manhã de sexta-feira, muito quente aqui em Brasília, vai ser realmente algo maravilhoso. Então, queria agradecer muito essa parceria, Kátia, e que nós possamos materializar outras parcerias juntos. E saudar todos os colegas que estão nos acompanhando agora.
Muito obrigada, Kleber. Eu, infelizmente, não posso acompanhar todo o evento hoje, estou também dividida entre 2 programações, mas desejo a todos vocês uma excelente manhã e faço votos aqui que as ideias sejam, né, que fomentem muitas ideias e muitas questões, ok? Convido, então, para nosso estúdio aqui, Neuda, seja bem-vinda, querida. Neuda é nossa parceira aí de muitos colóquios, a mediadora de muitos debates, e hoje a Neuda vai nos colaborar e nos ajudar nessa conversa com os 2 professores convidados. Nosso tema hoje é um tema muito especial e que transita em tantas áreas, né, do conhecimento e das áreas das línguas, em si, dos estudos das línguas, né? Obrigada, Neuda. Fique à vontade, seja bem-vinda de novo à sua casa aqui.
Eu que agradeço, querida. Bom dia, Kátia, bom dia, Kleber, muito bom estar aqui com vocês.
Muito bom. Não, eu vou quebrar um pouco o protocolo, viu, Kátia? Eu vou quebrar um protocolo. Eu queria, viu, Neuda, aproveitar a oportunidade para externar a minha gratidão pela sua existência e pela sua resistência, e também congratular você de uma forma oficial, que hoje você hoje é professora titular da Universidade Federal de Goiás. Então, eu queria destacar
muito bem.
de você conosco, viu, Neuda? Parabéns.
Participamos aqui nos bastidores dessa festa, né, Neuda?
Sim.
Aqui torcendo por você e vibrando aí por essa conquista. Meus parabéns também, meus parabéns.
Muito obrigada.
Estamos mais próximas geograficamente, né? E aqui nessa proximidade do colóquio, que já mais uma vez a gente trabalha junto. Bem, então eu e o Kleber agora nos retiramos, e Neuda, faça desse espaço a sua casa, receba nossos convidados, e eu desejo a vocês uma ótima manhã. Um beijinho.
Ótima manhã, sem ser passada por mim. Até daqui a pouquinho, então. Estou aqui nos bastidores, tá?
Beijo. Obrigada pela menção, a titularidade, e a torcida deu certo. Foi tudo muito tranquilo, com uma banca maravilhosa. Então, olá, pessoal, bom dia a todas, todos, todes, aqui nos Estados Unidos, na América do Norte. e nossas amigas que estão também na América do Sul, estão num fuso horário semelhante. Boa tarde, boa noite para quem nos assiste em outras partes do mundo. E é uma grande honra participar novamente de um colóquio aqui do nosso GCAL e mediar essa conversa sobre experiências e percepções de acadêmicos expert on translanguage, né? Nós vamos falar, então, muito sobre translinguagem. O tema, aliás, do nosso colóquio hoje é From Classroom Interventions to Teacher Education. Experiences and Insights from Budding Scholars on Translanguage Pedagogies. Ok, e antes de continuarmos, eu gostaria de convidar vocês a acessar os QR Codes, as que a Simone vai colocar aqui na tela para nós. Simone, querida, muito obrigada. Os QR Codes já estão por aí? Isso, muito bem. Então, eu vou convidar vocês para que conheçam um pouco mais o trabalho que o Proformação e o GCAL, o NB tem realizado, e a gente tem trabalhado com muitos temas como formação de professores, letramentos, políticas linguísticas, internacionalização, educação linguística crítica, né, descolonização. Então, convido vocês para usarem os QR Codes, nos sigam, deixem seu like, acompanhem nossas atividades e participem da nossa conversa aí no chat, ok? No finalzinho a gente tenta, se vocês tiverem alguma questão, a gente tenta trazer para os nossos convidados. Então, a gente vai já começar, então, vamos usar a nossa língua comum. Today's speakers are distinguished scholars, Dr. Abu Saleh Mohammed Rafi, and he's now in Bangladesh, quite far from here. He's an associate professor of linguistics at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh, and he's a senior research fellow at the University of South Australia, and he's also working on a project funded by the Australian Research Council. Dr. Rafi, he published many articles on translanguaging pedagogical approaches in top-tier journals. Let me mention some: Applied Linguistics, Applied Linguistic Review, International Journal of Education and Development, International Journal of Multilingualism, Language Identity and Education, Teaching in Higher Education, Classroom Discourse, Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, and many other chapters in edited collections, by many publishing houses like Springer, Routledge, and Vernon Press. And he co-edited the Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, a special issue that was issued in 2023. And he's also the convener of the 2024 International Conference on Transphenomenon in Language, Literature, and Culture, that is hosted by the Department of English and the Humanities at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. So, good morning, Rafi. It's very nice to have you here with us. And let me introduce you also our other speaker today, that's Professor John Fantan. He's now in New Jersey and from the University of Rutgers. He's an assistant professor of bilingual education in the Department of Urban Education at Rutgers University, Newark, here in the USA, and he's a multilingual speaker of Mandarin, English, Cantonese, and with transnational teaching experience in China, Cambodia, and the US. His theoretical grounds are on translanguage, and his research centers on working with pre- and in-service teachers, providing bilingual or multilingual students with equitable and inclusive learning environments, and also preparing culturally and linguistically competent teachers with social justice orientation. That is something very precious for us here at GCAL. And Dr. Chan, he has published 5 books, Let me just mention the publishing houses with Multilingual Matters, Springer, Routledge, and the Grutter Moulton. He has also published 8 special issues and more than 25 peer-reviewed journal articles. And for example, in very renowned journals like TESOL Quarterly, System, International Journal of Bilingual Education, Bilingualism, Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development, Journal of Language, Identity and Education. He has received an early career award from the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, Research SIG, in recognition of his scholarly contributions to Chinese English bilingual education. So good morning, Tian. I'm very pleased to have you here. Yeah, ni hao. I told Professor Tian I'm a student of Mandarin in the 8th semester, but it's very hard for us from the Western societies. So I'm go insofar as to say ni hao, hangao shi ren shi ni. Okay, so please let us just think about them. And it's not only because of the power and the significance of their ideas, but it's a great honor for us to introduce you two visionary scholars, trailblazers in our field. So join me in extending warm welcome to Professors Rafi and Tian.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. It's really my honor to be here sharing this space with all of you. Should I go ahead and share my screen?
So yeah, we are going to start. I don't know if Simone can just allow Professor Rafi to say just hello. Yes? Okay.
Hello, everybody. Hello. It's evening here, but very good morning to you. And I'm equally humbled and very much honored to share this space with you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too. So, Professor Chan, yes, you may go ahead and share your screen. Thank you.
Okay, so for today's discussion, so these are the 4 articles that will serve as the basis for today's discussion. So you can scan the QR code to get these articles if you'd like. And again, thank you so much for having us. And here's the outline of our talk for today. So we're going to start with introducing ourselves more. Then we're going to talk about the concept of translanguaging. And Rafi will share his empirical research on translanguaging interventions in classrooms. And then I will talk about translanguaging in teacher education. Then we're both going to talk about the importance of centering Southern perspectives in translanguaging research and end with some implications for future research. And we are very much looking forward to having the Q&A session with all of you. Rafi?
Yes. So we would like to start with our positionalities, and I will go first. I'll tell about myself. I'll try to tell a story, or at least try to tell it like a story. Unlike many students in the highly regimented structures of Bangladeshi education, I had a non-linear academic background. Starting out as a science student in secondary school, I ended up in the English department, a top-tier humanities department at Bangladeshi universities. That was largely due to my desire to learn to speak like so-called native speakers of English. While the bachelor's degree in my department includes both English linguistics and English literature as course requirement, the master's program requires students to graduate in one of the 2 streams. Like most Bangladeshi graduate students in the department, I gravitated towards the literature stream because I was fascinated by stories of kings and queens, glitter and glamour, and the tremendous wordplay that came with deep analysis of the soul-searching journeys of fictional characters in English literary works, as opposed to rather ordinary, everyday communication in the humdrum realm of language and linguistics that remained largely limited to English language teaching or ELT in Bangladeshi universities. After completing my bachelor's and master's degree with a concentration in literature, I eagerly anticipated entering academia and teaching literature courses to students. My career as a university teacher exposed me to the competing realities set by the new generation of Bangladeshi private universities that focus on marketable skills such as English proficiency and outcome based education. Such priorities did not quite match the illusory world of literature, nor did my literature training enabled me to help close the gap, compelling me to change my track from English literature to linguistics. The location of the second phase of my academic training was intriguing because I was determined to study linguistics in England, the land of my former colonizer and the birthplace of the English literature and linguistics discipline. While specializing in sociolinguistics at a British university, I had the privilege of observing how English departments functioned in the territories of colonizers and colonized. While the former apparently embraced multilingualism and de-eliticized English, accepting language variation and change alongside protection of minority languages and language revitalization projects, the latter in Bangladesh continued to weaponize the use of English language while ghettoizing local languages, cultures, literatures written in those languages. While I observed the differences in English departments across countries are caused by the ideologies, requirements, and constraints of each environment, I believe Bangladeshi English department would benefit greatly from England's welcoming attitude towards multilingualism, de-eliticized English, language variation and change. These encounters collectively broadened my perspective as a teacher and also prepared me for the next adventure of my academic journey. I was offered PhD fellowship at several prestigious universities right away. I chose an Australian university because of its generous scholarship package and the length of the program. Perhaps most importantly, what piqued my interest was translanguaging theory, which my prospective supervisor at that university suggested instead of the traditional theoretical framework I proposed in my proposal. So here started my translanguaging journey. I completed my PhD writing a thesis by publication. I wrote 16 articles as part of the thesis by publication project, and most of those were published during my PhD candidacy at that university. After completing my PhD last year, I got back Bangladesh and I got an early promotion to associate professor at my current university. And I'm also working as a senior research fellow at University of South Australia. Jongfong, could you please go to the next slide? So if you liked what I just read out, that was from my biography published in a De Gruyter volume. You can read the full piece here and also go to the next slide. So this is the conference I'm organizing, and Jongfong and I are having a very special event where we will be interviewing two pioneers of translanguaging scholarship, Professor Ophelia Garza and Professor Liu. Do join us. Jongfong, over to you.
Thank you. So to share a little bit more about myself, so I was born and raised in China. I grew up in the northeastern part of China. And then almost a decade ago, and I came to the US and I got my master's degree in TESOL first from Boston University. And then I went to Boston College to pursue my PhD in curriculum and instruction with a specialization in language literacy and culture. And then after that, I graduated during the pandemic, and my first job was assistant professor of TESOL applied linguistics at the university at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And now I moved to a new position as assistant professor of bilingual education at Rutgers University, Newark. And I consider myself as a multilingual speaker of Mandarin, English, and Cantonese. And in this map, I want to show you my teaching journey with multilingual students. So I was a EFL teacher back in China, and then I did some volunteer teaching in Cambodia And then I went to US to gain more teaching Chinese and English experiences in the US, especially in the northeast part of US. And to share a little bit more about my sort of like my relationship with English, right? So when I first came to the US to study as an international student, I always had this doubt, like, was my English good enough? I questioned myself, like that I speak with an accent, my grammar was not that perfect, and I tried every means to improve my English, especially the academic reading and writing skills. And after my English got better and I started to hear more compliments, like people will tell me, "Oh, your English is very good." Uh, the more I heard about this, I heard about these compliments, the more conflicted I start to feel, right? Because either way, when they say, "Was my English good enough?" or "Your English is very good," they still position me as an outsider, as a non-native English speaker. So you can see I experienced both feelings at both ends, just like this pendulum. And then after I graduated from my master's degree, I got into PhD program. I started to question about why does it always have to be with my relationship with English, right? Because I really want people to see me as a full human being with multilingual skills instead of just evaluating my English skills all the time. So I was really lucky to encounter the notion of translanguaging in my first year of PhD program. I started to dig into more literature on this translanguaging. So some of the texts really left a very influential impact on myself are these three books. Translanguaging by Ophelia Garcia and Professor Li Wei, and also the other two books by the CUNY NICEP team. And I think translanguaging really helped me to start to reevaluate myself and the role of English in my life. Reading about translanguaging and just learning about translanguaging, I think the concept of translanguaging really captured who I am, my daily language practices, because this is the norm that represent how I really communicate with my bilingual communities. I always use all the linguistic features from my linguistic repertoire, Cantonese, English, and Mandarin altogether. And it also deeply affirmed my positive bilingual identity. It helped me see bilingualism as a resource and an advantage. So from my English is not good enough, I start to see I am a multilingual user of Mandarin, English, and Cantonese. From my writing doesn't look like a native speaker to my writing conveys my unique voice as a transnational multilingual writer. And also translanguaging further legitimized the value of creating a multilingual space instead of strict insistence on monolingual approaches. And to quickly summarize, I think I see translanguaging as mirrors. It really promoted my deep self-reflection, and it was really a self-affirming and self-empowering journey. Here, just want to use a quote from Chicana scholar Gloria Anzaldúa. So, in this quote, so I am my language. Until I can take pride in my language, I cannot take pride in myself. I think this quote deeply resonates with myself, and it really helped me see myself in a different light and in a full light. And now let's transition to talk about, so what exactly is this notion of translanguaging? So as I said, probably you noticed that translanguaging is really a multifaceted and multi-layer concept. So translanguaging represents how bilingual communities make sense, engage in meaning making. So it's a practice. It refers to the complex natural practices of bilinguals during their meaning making processes, characterized by multilingual, multimodal, multisemiotic, and multisensory performance. Translanguaging is also a theory of language which aims to interrogate the duality of bilingualism and really challenges this traditional notion of bilinguals just two monolinguals within one, right? Because bilingualism is dynamic, it's much more complex. And it also challenges the colonial and modernist era ideologies of language standardization by legitimizing language minoritized speakers' linguistic varieties.
Yes. Yes. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Jongfeng?
Rafi,
Yeah.
go ahead. You can talk about the pedagogy part. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So, as the definition says, translanguage pedagogy is about a more dynamic, fluid, and hybrid approach to teaching in and of language to support children's emergent by multilingualism, which draws upon their full communicative repertoire and cultural and linguistic forms of knowledge while combating language hierarchies prevalent at macro levels, right? So, as I discussed my a bit of my biography before, my orientation to linguistics or my training to linguistics started much later because I studied English literature in my undergrad and first masters. And I also conducted my research in the global south context when translanguaging was proliferating or celebrating much in the north, right? So I felt like translanguaging to get the recognition of the benefits of translanguaging pedagogy in the global south context, it should have a different types of orientation, and the existing definition of translanguaging pedagogy could do a lot more or a lot better. And I also saw that scholars sometimes criticize translanguaging in classroom because, could you go to the next slide, Jungfeng? Even in my like one of the preliminary articles, I saw that translanguaging, if we validate translanguaging without a pedagogic focus, it might not provide the satisfactory outcome. And some other scholars are critiquing translanguaging, promoting elite bilingualism, this and that. So my argument comes from the part that when you are looking at translanguaging in a classroom, you should look at it from a pedagogical perspective instead of a bilingual behavior or only as translanguaging. Just to give you an example, if you have problem with your teeth, you'll go to a dentist, not to a gynecologist, right? So we need to settle the debate here, and I wanted to work on this more, but I don't get much time. But still, I try to contribute something to this conceptualization of translanguaging pedagogy in my doctoral thesis. Next slide, please. Uh, Next slide as well. So I talked about the situated nature of translanguaging in the previous article shown published in Applied Linguistics. So I'm arguing here that rather than focusing exclusively on language, all components of multilingual students' whole selves, such as linguistics, cultural, historical, political dimension should be explicitly recognized, named, and accommodated in the design of translanguaging pedagogy. So far, I saw that mainstream scholars in translanguaging scholarship, they're particularly focusing on the highlighting the linguistic element where overshadowing the other elements of translanguaging of multilingual students in the design. I believe the other dimensions of multilingual students should also be highlighted to support the decolonial agenda of this scholarship. Yes, so I'll carry on with this, Jungfeng. The previous slide, please. Yes, so my discussion on the focal article starts here. I'll particularly share findings. I'm sorry, there's Adhan going on. This is the Muslim prayer time, but it will end in a minute. So I'll particularly focus on this article titled Translanguaging as a Transformative Act in Reading Classroom, Perspective from Bangladeshi Private University. As I said, translanguaging pedagogy could do a lot more than only focusing on linguistic aspect. It can talk about the political dimensions as well. So I took this project as a political project, and I want to transform something that is quite evident in Bangladeshi society. Our beauty standards are shaped by the colonial definition of beauty. That means you have to be fair, you have to be tall, you have to have sharp nose like our former colonizers who were Caucasian, like who possesses Caucasian skin, right? So as per the definition, Me, clever, will never be considered beautiful or handsome, but John Fong can be because he is fair. So, yeah, I already knew this colonial, construction of beauty prevailed in our society. So I carried out a reading intervention and I designed translanguaging pedagogy situated in our authentic classroom environment, and I carried out it in a first year classroom of an English medium private university. So I'll just talk about the intervention part here, not going much into the details. The analysis of the intervention data, like the translanguaging pedagogical intervention, I found three themes. One is engagement, the second one is enhancing metalinguistic metacognitive knowledges, and finally transforming the idea of beauty in Bangladeshi education context. So Jongfong, could you please go to the next slide? So for the engagement part, I started with a small activity that I named Tell Me Now. I asked my students three questions, but I'll be discussing only two questions here. The first one is, who is the most beautiful person in this picture? All right, so my students started responding because I provided them a translanguaging space instead of that monolingual English only policy that is the policy of the university. So students use their entire linguistic repertoire to engage with me to discuss the picture. So to get a clearer response from each person in the picture, I asked a specific question. Do you think the Asian girl in this picture is the most beautiful? Students said no. Then I asked the white girl. A student said she's like a star. Then I asked, how about the only black boy in the picture? All students laughed as if black cannot be beautiful. Then I asked, how about the white boy? All students said, oh, he's so handsome, cute, right? Then I asked, why do you think them beautiful? Two students said, because they're white. And one student yelled saying, no way. Okay, so the next question I asked, what is the concept of beauty in your culture? This question dropped the students to define beauty from their local contexts. Students provided several responses, such as, everyone thinks that fair skin makes girls beautiful. Another student said fair skin. Another student said fairness means beautiful. These responses revealed how the British colonization of the Indian subcontinent shaped the standard of beauty based on fair skin among Bangladeshi people. This racial feature does not align with the brown skin color of most Bangladeshis like us. Next slide, please. So, I purposefully selected three reading texts of comparable difficulty on the concept of beauty constructed across cultures. Since the crux of my intervention was to explore the transformative potential of translanguaging pedagogies, I purposefully selected text to investigate as one example if a translanguaging pedagogical intervention could transform the idea of colonial construction of beauty into a more inclusive concept. So each reading task was carried out through several translanguaging pedagogical strategies, such as creating a translanguaging space, alternating languages in vocabulary induction as a scaffolding strategy, read aloud protocols, guided reading in authentic Bangla text, and silent reading. So this is the first text. This text is in English, providing general ideas about beauty, borrowing from popular culture. It also has an additional focus on the role of celebrity images in the construction of beauty for young boys. Click. The specific translanguaging strategies I used here: vocabulary induction in two languages with semantic attributes of the words, cognate expressions across languages, context clues, and using artifact as a learner-centered object. For example, of vocabulary induction in Bangla and English, I asked the students if they knew the meaning of the word inflated. You can see the word inflated highlighted in the second picture. and waited for the students to reflect on the word. In this instance, students started looking up the word in bilingual dictionaries, which they are not allowed in their English medium classroom, right? Students translanguage to ask if the inflated word was related to influence. What was the reason? Because inflated and influence sound similar. I provided the Bangla meaning of inflated word on the lecture slide, and the student immediately responded, "Oh, that means to exaggerate something." This metalinguistic transfer helped the students to build a bridge between the familiar word exaggerate and the new word inflated. Students also provided cognate expressions such as beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You can see that line in the first picture, right? And students provided cognates in multiple languages such as Hindi. We do not speak or teach Hindi in Bangladesh, but the pedagogical design, you can see, maximize the linguistic resources. Students are providing and exercising languages that were prohibited traditionally in Bangladeshi classroom, right? Then again, the word inflated we just discussed came as a means of demonstrating how the posters of female celebrities create an inflated idea of beauty among young men. The saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, was also used to indicate that the picture perfect bodily image does not necessarily mean beauty in reality. The text argued that men spend time and feel most comfortable with someone who is often the opposite of the picture, and that person could be a friend, a sister, aunt, or cousin. As an illustration, I use the picture of Joya Hassan, a Bangladeshi actress, a picture that will hardly be used in Bangladeshi English medium classroom because they promote Anglo-normative cultures. They will rather borrow someone from Hollywood instead of a Bangladeshi actress, right? So what's the benefit of this using local picture of celebrities, local celebrities? The picture of a Bangladeshi actress helped the students understand the concept of inflated beauty from their own cultural background. Go to the next slide, please. Well, I asked my students to read a Bangla text, which will again not be used in English medium classroom, right? So this text is in Bangla, but it enabled students to look more critically at the construction of beauty from the local context. It addressed racism, drawing instances from everyday practices of Bangladeshi people to the literary works of the first Bangladeshi Nobel laureate, Rabindranath Tagore. While Tagore appreciated dark skin in his works, but interestingly, the article argued that none of the female heroines of Tagore's novel were dark skinned. So there is a contradiction. In alluding to Tagore's heroine, the text sheds light on Bangladeshi parents' struggle to get their dark-skinned daughters married off. These parents often force their daughters to use different cosmetics, such as fairness creams, to decrease melanin, a pigment that is responsible for the dark tone in human skin. The concluding line of the text expressed frustration at how the colonial standard of beauty dehumanizes these dark skinned girls, reducing them only to their skin color and shatters their hopes and dreams. Right? The students said, terrible, bitter truth, and so on. They were really engaged with the text and in the intervention. Click. The third text in English focused on skin color and body shaming in American youth culture. I instructed the students to read the text and share their understanding. It was an advanced reading text and the students went blank. So I decided to paraphrase. As soon as I started to paraphrase in translanguaging, I see all students immediately participated in paraphrasing the text in translanguaging, expressing their understanding of each line. At this point, I asked the students to translate their understanding in English. Interestingly, it immediately silenced the entire class. It exemplifies how English only instruction silences the rich flow of interaction in multilingual classroom. However, in the instance where students fail to perform immediately in oral English, does not necessarily discredit the benefits of translanguaging pedagogy. The translanguaging intervention was new for them. It created a new environment. Hence, probably it was a bit unsettling for them. Once they become comfortable, they performed better monolingually at the end of the intervention. So after completing several reading activities and small exercises, I investigated whether the students moved from their previous perception of beauty. I asked, so what is beauty? Next slide, please. So these are the responses students provided. Just two examples here. Student 1, I think beauty is not only your physical appearance but also your inner beauty. And other students said beauty is a concept that changes in people's perception. Click. We can compare these definitions with the definitions students previously provided. Everyone thinks that fair skin makes beautiful. Fair skin, fairness means beauty. So the transformation is completed. That's why we thought, like I was thinking, we need to go beyond the linguistic focus to achieve the decolonial agenda of translanguaging pedagogy and highlight all components of multilingual students in the design of those pedagogies. Thank you very much. Next, you, Jongfeng.
Thank you, Rafi. So Rafi just showed you a case of classroom intervention of translanguaging in classrooms. So I want to talk about, so it's also important to train teachers how to engage in translanguaging with their students as well, how to create a translanguaging space. So I'm going to talk about translanguaging in teacher education, and I'm going to address both in-service teachers and pre-service teachers. So for in-service teachers, so I published an article with Leah Shepherd-Carey back in 2020 on TESOL Quarterly, as you can see this article. So in this article, we advocate for promoting teacher-researcher collaboration as one way to reimagine the future of translanguaging pedagogies in TESOL classrooms, because we believe collaborative approaches between researchers and educators can help further the aims of translanguaging pedagogies through mutual support in addressing everyday issues and sharing information on best practices, and also drawing upon both the expertise of practitioners and also scholars, and how to best contextualize translanguaging theory into real classroom context. And in particular, we propose this framework, co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts. So this is a framework adapted from the Garcia et al.'s 2017 stance, design, and shifts framework. So in this framework, we want to go one step further to emphasize the equitable collaboration and the porous roles between teachers and researchers, and really situates theory, practice, and research as interrelated. So as you can see in this figure, we position collaboration as a dynamic process during which researchers and teachers, they must negotiate co-stances, develop the co-designs, and make co-shifts to address the needs of the students. And we conceptualize our co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts processes as iterative and interconnected. So you can see each element, they functions in concert with the other. They all interact with each other, all influence the flow of collaborative processes, and is situated within the nexus of teacher-researcher collaboration. So to give you a more elaborate definition, this is how we define co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts. So for co-stance, it refers to the enduring dynamic process in which both parties, teachers and researchers, they collaboratively, respectively, and openly discuss and negotiate their systems, their belief system, and their ideological systems regarding bilingualism and translanguaging, so that it can better inform their pedagogical framework. And co-design refers to the iterative process that involves both teachers and researchers co-planning units, lessons, and also assessments that build upon students' full linguistic repertoires. And co-shifts refer to the many moments that teachers and researchers engage in self and communal reflections and make flexible pedagogical designs that have room for lesson adjustments and shifts in response to the students' needs. So we believe this framework provides a heuristic for not only building equitable partnerships, but also scholars can use this framework to examine how partnerships can be improved. Because in this framework, we specifically highlight these three important points: co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts. Because we expect teacher-researcher collaboration is not gonna like a smooth journey, right? Both parties will engage in a lot of difficult conversations, and a lot of tensions will emerge and arise from the process. But we want both teachers and scholars to see tensions as also opportunities to further both parties' understanding and reinforce the pedagogy. How can we systemically and purposefully design translanguaging in classrooms, which is highlighted in my colleague Rafi's presentation, right? Like how do you design translanguaging intervention with purpose and strategies. And if you like to learn more about this teacher-researcher collaboration in translanguaging classrooms, Leah and I also published a book last summer. And in this book, we really explore teacher-researcher partnerships as a pathway to advancing translanguaging pedagogies. And in particular, we highlight both the opportunities and challenges of implementing contextualized translanguaging designs, and to demonstrate how these partnerships resist linguistic hierarchies in educational institutions. And here is a QR code for you. If you like to learn more about this book, you can scan the QR code. And move forward, I also want to address not just in-service teachers, they need translanguaging training, but also pre-service teachers as well. We also need to integrate translanguaging in teacher education curriculum, especially in university teacher training programs. So this is another article I published with another colleague, Qian Zhang Wu. So in this article, we talk about how we prepare pre-service content area teachers, which means the teachers who are aspired to teach like mathematics, social studies, and science, and etc. through translanguaging. And in particular, in this article, we ask two questions. So how did pre-service content area teachers make sense of translanguaging during a graduate level course on bilingual theory and practice? And how did they infuse translanguaging into their instructional practices? So I'm going to show you how what we actually did, right? So how we integrated translanguaging into the coursework. So this was a 7-week-long graduate level teacher education course taught at a private research institution in the northeastern United States. So we integrated translanguaging from these three aspects. So first, we taught and students also engaged in conversations on this topic of translanguaging. We give a guest lecture on the topic of translanguaging. We let students engage with the text and videos related to the translanguaging topic, because there are many good resources, actually, especially, for example, designed by the CUNY NICEP team. And we also engage students in oral group discussions, and they also produce written reflections, for example, in-class journaling, teaching philosophy, to talk about their perceptions toward translanguaging and their belief systems toward multilingualism. We also create translanguaging spaces in our classroom, like modeling translanguaging. We allow students to design multilingual posters and do journaling using their full linguistic repertoire. We also did a Chinese read aloud to the students in our class, so that they can also become more empathetic. They can grow more empathy to see how English language learners or multilingual learners feel when they are in a language environment that is totally not familiar to them. We also ask a student to do a bilingual field trip to engage in linguistic landscape analysis to further experience translanguaging in communities in real life. And also, not just teaching and learning about translanguaging and modeling translanguaging spaces, we also provided students with opportunities to practice translanguaging. So, for example, we one of the assignments was to ask a student to develop linguistically responsive lesson plans to integrate translanguaging into their lesson plans. And we also had a roundtable discussion to further debrief their lesson plans and to see which aspect can and how to further improve your translanguaging strategy implementation. These are some findings. So we actually found that through integrating translanguaging into coursework, these pre-service content area teachers start to perceive themselves as language teachers as well, because that's very important, right? They just don't see themselves as content area teachers, because language is also the pathway to content, and it's part of the content itself also. So they also recognize the importance of addressing emerging bilingual needs in their teaching practice. They developed an emerging translanguaging stance and adopted translanguaging pedagogies to different extents in their lesson designs. So here I just give you two lesson plan examples from the students. As you can see, they started to strategically integrate some translanguaging strategies as they plan their lesson. Like for Kate, it's grade 1 physical science lesson plan. She actually gave students the space to pair up emerging bilinguals with others so that they can share in their home language or preferred language, right? As you can see in Winston's grade 10 social studies lesson plan, so he intentionally allows students to use translators in the classroom, and students can also annotate the text and use whatever language they desire for any comments or notes, right? So during the process, right, he really created a translanguaging space. Some implications from this study. So I think this study, what we learned is it's really important that you integrate a translanguaging perspective across the whole curriculum, because integrating translanguaging is not just a hit and run effort, right? It's not just a one-time effort. Especially you need to make connections to practicum or field experience. It is also important to continue to create space for having critical dialogues around translanguaging in teacher education courses. And more importantly, it is essential to center criticality in bilingual education-related coursework and other learning opportunities. I think my colleague Rafi also mentioned this, right? How do you cultivate teachers' mindset to challenge coloniality in the traditional curriculum, right? How can you really move teachers to see translanguaging as transformative, social justice-oriented? I think we still have a long way to go in this aspect. Yeah, I think back to you, Rafi.
Thank you very much. So, Jongfeng and I co-edited a special issue for critical inquiry in language studies. So, we'd like to talk a bit about that. So, you already know that translanguaging has introduced a paradigmatic shift in how we think about languages and how we work with bilingual students, right? And there has been an exponential growth in translanguaging research, with the majority of the extent studies taking place in global North context so far. So this idea of this particular special issue centered on the global South occurred to me when I was a second year PhD student, and Jongfeng was already a rising star in translanguaging scholarship. So one fine morning, I hit him up to chat about how we are still missing a broader understanding of translanguaging from a Southern perspective. For example, translanguaging research did not until then necessarily consider the espoused goal and sociopolitical realities of language educations that were not always the same for non-Western societies in the global South due to their histories of exclusion and disenfranchisement. Jongfeng was interested in that idea, and he asked, "Do you have anyone in mind with whom you'd like to pursue this special issue?" And I was like, "Well, I was thinking about you. You were on my mind." So we had a good laugh, and then we started this project. So in this special issue, we envisioned Global South as an encompassing term which refers not only to the geographic regions of Latin America, Asia, Africa, Oceania that have not been part of the upward march of economic, social, and political progress in the wealthier nations of the North, but also to the conditions of suffering and inequality brought about by capitalism and colonialism, and people who may exist in the global North in the form of excluded, silenced, and marginalized populations such as undocumented immigrants, the unemployed, ethnic religious minorities, victims of sexism, homophobia, and racism. We purposefully brought together emerging and established scholars who are both residing in and have deep connections with the global South contexts in order to critically examine translanguaging and language in education research with Southern epistemologies and theoretical lenses. Now, John Fong will provide an overview of our special issue.
Thank you, Rafi. So here's an overview of the special issue. As you can see, we have 4 articles. 2 of them are empirical, and the other 2 are conceptual. And we also have one commentary from Professor Li Wei. So in this special issue, it really features studies from various regions and communities. So we have contributions from featuring these different contexts: China, South Africa, Brazil, Australia, and Canada, especially talking about addressing the international students origin from the global South countries, their needs when they pursue studies in Canada. And these authors also engage with diverse methodological tools such as design-based research, case study, and thematic analysis. And we also feature different classroom contexts as well. So in this special issue, it addresses remote and urban ones spanning across primary to tertiary levels. And again, here's a QR code if you are interested to see the whole special issue and to read it. Particularly, we have these 3 objectives that we want to achieve in this special issue. So first is to provide counter narratives that revisit the role of English in relation to other minoritized languages as a resource, and not just the only valid resource around the world to further advance linguistic, epistemic, and social issue sheds light on the potential of Southern perspectives to problematize and further expand the notion of translanguaging, as well as to maintain its critical edge. And last but not least, we want to utilize this special issue as a venue to foster global harmony and equitable knowledge exchange between scholars residing in the global North and South to further our understanding of bi- and multilingualism in language teaching and learning. So to just sum up our presentation, here are some implications that we believe are very important to further move the scholarship of translanguaging. So we think it is important to design longitudinal studies to track the lasting impact of translanguaging on learning experiences and systemic change in K-12 school settings. And as we both mentioned, it is very important to continue to recenter decolonial and Southern perspectives in translanguaging research to elevate racialized communities' knowledge and experiences. And we want to further promote teacher-researcher collaboration to advance translanguaging theory and normalize translanguaging practices in diverse classroom contexts, and also expand translanguaging research into underrepresented contexts, such as rural areas, indigenous languages, and world languages spaces. Back to you, Rafi.
All right, thank you very much. So the implications I'll share, those are particularly centered in the global South context, particularly Bangladesh and related context in South Asia. So the first implication that I didn't put here, we need to separate translanguaging from translanguaging pedagogy to make the benefits visible in global South context, because these classrooms are already translanguaging, right? So they do not have the design, the pedagogic design, as well as the pedagogic training, as Jung Fong was saying, teacher education. They do not recognize those resources, and they do not have the strategies to reap benefits from these naturally occurring translanguaging pedagogies. The second area of research, although we are talking a lot about translanguaging pedagogies, translanguaging oriented assessment still is an underexplored area. I published an article in Applied Linguistics Review 2023B. I'll share a link at some point. So you can read that article, focused in Global South context. And then again, doing research with the teachers and students and researchers, I think is not enough, because the policies always come from the top down people who are not necessarily linguists, so they will not understand. We need to engage those people to move forward our translanguaging endeavor. And last but not the least, success in translanguaging might not mean success in our Global South context that views excellent English proficiency, particular accent of particular country as the parameter for success. So your translanguaging performance might not be considered success in our context, right? So in that case, we need to engage all stakeholders of the knowledge community, parents, guardians, like the common people, friends. Everybody should be sensitized with this translanguaging movement. Yeah, this is what I had to share for now. Thank you.
And if you would like to contact us, here's our email address. And thank you so much, Paul. We are looking
Thank
forward
you.
to the conversation with you. Thank you.
You are muted.
Yeah, that's what I listened most on the pandemic, Tian. Professor, you're muted. All right, so Tian and Rafa.
Dongfeng, you're muted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How about now? Can you listen to me well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Tian and Rafa, what a delight to listen to you. Thank you for illuminating our virtual stage with your experience, your expertise on this multifaceted, multi-layer, polysemic concept of translanguaging. And thank you for sharing with us this more dynamic, fluid, as you said, hybrid approach to teaching language. Your lecture was truly exceptional. 谢谢你，Chan. Don't know about Rafi.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I should have learned the Brazilian word for thank you. What is it?
It's obrigado.
Obrigado.
Obrigado. Perfect pronunciation. Very nice. So we've prepared some questions for you, but shall we go over the comments on YouTube? Simone, dear, can you project them here? All right, so Rosane Rocha, pessoa querida, beijo para você. Rosane says, thank you. It's great to see that your work in translanguage not only addresses colonial legacies related to language, but also engages with broader social and teacher education issues. Thank you, Rosane.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you.
Ananya, Ananya said,
He's my student.
So Ananya, thank you for being here with us. She says, thank you so much for your insightful session. Kleber said, I really appreciated your presentation, Tan and Rafi. Thanks a lot. Of your many contributions of your research to the field, which do you see as the most impactful or significant, and why? That's hard, isn't it?
Dongfeng, would you like to go first, because you have more experience, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I'm really a strong believer of advocating for translanguaging pedagogy and to further normalize translanguaging pedagogies in classrooms. And I also strongly believe in the strategic and purpose use of translanguaging pedagogies also in classroom. I think in my talk, I especially talk about teacher-researcher collaboration. I think that I hope this will be seen as a important contribution to the field, and not just how I see how important it is, right? Yeah, so I really hope people can really take up this framework and to engage with this framework I just talked about, the co-stance, co-design, and co-shifts, and further push the boundaries and resist the linguistic hierarchies in classrooms at different levels. And researchers, we should go into the classroom to work with teachers, because I always tell scholars, teachers, they know the best, right? They work with their students at a front line every day. And I think it's important to not romanticize translanguaging. By engaging teachers in collaboration, we can have a more contextualized and nuanced understanding that translanguaging is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It may look differently in different contexts, right? I think Rafi also talked about the importance of global South context, right? Like the implementation of translanguaging might look very different, or how people take up translanguaging in the global South context is really different from how people discuss translanguaging in the global North context. So having that in mind is also very important. I think by bringing two parties together, we can engage in more conversations. And I think later, I also agree with Rafi, like we need to involve all different stakeholders in this journey, right? Not just teachers, researchers, but also policymakers, especially when we talk about, we want to see the bi-directional effort to be happening in the future, like not just bottom up. Because we have seen a lot of bottom-up translanguaging intervention. What about the top-down translanguaging intervention, right? So how can we make that happen, and how can we bring all those parties into the conversation to further normalize translanguaging pedagogy in classrooms? That is something I would be very interested, and would love to continue to contribute to this field. Yeah, so thank you for that question.
Indeed, you argue in your text, the ones you read, that this sort of the successful implementation of translanguage pedagogies demand teacher, researcher, student collaboration. Yeah, that is challenging, but really important. We have one question. We are going to ask you just one question, Tian and Raf. It's from our group, GCAL group. It's in your research, you emphasize the importance of integrating Southern perspectives into translanguaging practices, particularly in educational systems shaped by colonial and monolingual paradigms. And it was quite interesting because you mentioned that South is not really just, we're not talking about the geographical hemisphere, yeah? We're talking about the excluded communities everywhere in the planet. Then what challenges and opportunities have you encountered when applying these perspectives in educational contexts dominated by global North paradigms? And what key recommendations would you offer to ensure these Southern epistemologies are properly integrated into language teaching?
Should I go first? Well, so I will answer to this, but I would also like to answer to the previous question, Clever asked. That was really interesting. I don't like, as I said, I started my linguistic career much late during my PhD, and I completed my PhD not long ago. But I published substantially, and when I was doing my PhD, I didn't find much work in global South context. There was only one book on higher education context. My PhD is in higher education context, right? So that was the problem. But in my research, I showed linguistic ecologies of global South classrooms, and I also provided pedagogical framework across disciplines. Like the presentation I did today, that was on reading classroom, but I have publications for writing classrooms. I have publications for content learning classroom, like English literature as well as anthropology. So you can see examples of pedagogical frameworks that you might find useful for your own classroom as well. You just need to adapt them. And another contribution I hope I have made, that is, I recently reviewed two key collections, edited book, one by Jeff Maxwell and another by David Gramling. And the most controversial issue in translanguaging scholarship is whether named languages should be recognized or they should be eliminated from the focus. The debate between translanguaging and code switching scholarships. So I try to needle that, like thread a needle and try to find a common ground in this debate. So I believe you might like reading that article. I think that would make some impact on the theoretical level. And now, answering to the current question, what kind of challenges and recommendations? Well, there are lots of challenges because, like if I talk about Bangladesh, it was colonized for a long time and it's almost 2 centuries now, but still we have that colonial hangover. So the first challenge is to challenge that colonial mindset. And then again, the challenge is very few people are doing this kind of transformative research. In the global south, talk about India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we ELT is a big industry. We always talk about developing English language proficiency, right? And now again with the TESOL, now we are focusing particular type of accent and all. So it's very challenging. The solution is probably to do more research to engage more people in this, and also the concept of teacher education in translanguaging in the global south context is kind of non-existent. So we need more research in those areas as well. Jongfong, you'd like to add something?
Sure. I think you already captured answered the question pretty well. I think I will just add one more thing. I think just also echo what I just shared. What recommendations when we ensure in startup epistemologies are properly integrated into language teaching. I think it's important that we start from the people in the global south, not just okay, I transfer the framework from the global north, now apply it to global south. We need to start from the people, the ideas, the knowledge systems that generated originally from the global south, and then we think how can we further problematize and expand the notion of translanguaging. So I think that's very important that we really center the indigenous languages and knowledge systems, really integrate their beliefs in the education systems, right? Not start the other way. So I think that's important when we engage with research. And again, we also need to problematize and continue to think about many beliefs that we just take it for granted, right? Because we never question about it, because that might be because of the colonial history deep rooted, and a lot of us even internalize those ideologies when we doing research, right? Like we know a lot of research methodology, they actually generated from the global north, right? Maybe we need to develop our own research methodologies even when we engage in this kind of important practice, right? That's why I advocate for more participatory, action-oriented research instead of just following the traditional Eurocentric norms of engaging with research methodology, right? Like what we would say quantitative versus qualitative, right? Because that's also a very binary view, very westernized view how we see research, right? In this sense. So again, I think a lot of things, right, that we need to learn how to unlearn. I think unlearning is part of the process, right? It can be painful. It takes a lot of time. It's going to be iterative. But I think unlearning colonial ideologies and relearn and regain, reaffirming ourselves is very important in this process. So thank you again for this question.
Thank you, Rafi and Tan, for sharing your provoking ideas to expand our horizons. They really ignite these flames of innovation within each of us. I do appreciate that. And is it possible, Simone, to give us just the last comments? I'd like just to finish reading the last comments on YouTube here. Christina says, Eluf says, thank you, Chan and Rafi, for such amazing experience on translanguaging praxis shared today. Maciel from INSS, INSS says, parabéns. Thank you, Maciel. Parabéns means congratulations in Portuguese.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And let me see if we have we have more later on. You may read the comments over there on our channel. So we've come to the end of our colloquium, yeah, and thank you, Tan, Rafi, for your valuable contributions today. And I would like to invite each of you to share any final thoughts or remarks. You have 1 minute to do that, please.
Rafi, you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay, sure. I just want to thank you all for joining the conversation. I really enjoyed sharing our research. And I would just say, let's continue to push the boundaries to normalize translanguaging in our classrooms. Yeah, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, I echo the same. Jongpong said, yes, it might be shocking for the traditionalist, but then again, the world is changing. We should have a changed approach to languages as well, right? And if we don't fight, who will?
Yeah.
So yeah, keep spirited and yeah, continue the journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nilda, Rafi, Tian, I really appreciated your presentation. I'm ecstasy in this moment because all things that you present or defend, it is pretty much the same, the conception that our group have in Brazil. When you talk about translanguaging, it is so important to rescue the voice of a scholar from the global south. I really, really appreciate it. And I feel so happy to listen to you, but I'm so happy because you are my friends, and so happy to establish some academic partnership and some collaboration together. It's wonderful. And I'd like to listen Nilda now. And Nilda, I really appreciated the way that you conducted our colloquium. I'm sure that the audience really appreciated you. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Hafi. Thank you, Nilda.
Thank you, Clever. And so we came to the end, yeah, of our colloquium, which is a very pleasant moment, delightful. And we'd like to invite you, our audience, for our next colloquium, colloquia actually, yeah. We have 2 more to say, yeah, Kleber, would you like to share them?
Yeah, in October 2025, it is, you have the opportunity to interact with Dr. Diogo do Espírito Santo from Universidade Federal do Recôncavo da Bahia. He talked about translinguando entre a fixidez e a fluidez das práticas comunicativas. Tia, Rafi, Dr. Diego have your background like inspiration to defend the thesis in Brazil, and he will present his thesis in our colloquium too. It'd be great.
So thank you all for attending. A special thanks to our distinguished speakers, my dear colleagues, Kleber, who's here with me. So have a nice day, night, wherever you are. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.